Hello, good morning, everybody. Hello. Welcome. If you're watching this back, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching. Please do let me know in the comments if you're watching live or on replay and where you're watching from. So today's topic was one of the most highly requested that I've had in a long time. February is the month of February is the month of love, but we're turning it into the month of self-love. And a lot of people in the last live asked, could I cover kind of self-talk, self-belief, that kind of stuff. So today we're going to do a little bit of digging into our self-talk, the way that we talk to ourselves and how we can change that to be a bit kinder. So if you're watching on live, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. If you're watching on replay, let me know in the comments that you're watching replay and where from. And I'm going to get started. Hopefully we can see that. Okay, I'm going to move you there. So like I said, we're going to cover today how to talk to yourself like your best friend. And it's probably not going to be exactly what you think. So yeah, let's dig into this. Hey, East Sussex, me too. Morning, Annette. For those that have done this burn framework with me before, you're probably already pretty good at this. For those that haven't, let me explain. So everything that I talk about that ties into burnout, and I very much believe that self-love, the way that we talk to ourselves, self-belief, all of that very much ties into burnout. Whenever I talk about these topics, I talk about them through the lens of the burn framework. So the way that we'll go through this workshop will be through the burn framework. And this is something I built after burning out the second time and realizing that actually burnout wasn't fixed by meditation and yoga and all those things that I used to teach, but actually that we need to dig a little bit deeper. So the burn framework is be aware, unlearn, rebuild, and now take action. And if you do any workshop with me, there is a good chance that I will walk you through this framework on the topic that we're talking about. So let's see how we can apply this to the way that we talk to ourselves. And please do kind of follow along in the comments. You might want a pen and paper. You might want to write some notes on your phone. That is fine. I will also post a replay of this over on the app. So if you are on the app, you'll be able to watch this at any time. And I always post it with the slides. So if you're like, oh, Bex, I don't have a pen and paper, or I want to make notes later, then that's absolutely fine. So let's start with be aware. Now, I want you to think about the last time something didn't quite go to plan. How did you talk to yourself? What words did you say to yourself? And if you're in the comments, or even if you're watching on replay, please do let me know what words came out of your mouth or came into your head the last time something didn't go to plan. Now, I've actually had a big example of this recently where I'm organizing an event that definitely is not going to plan. Like, we haven't sold enough tickets and all that kind of stuff. And so obviously the voice in my head, our inner monologue, says, you're not good enough. You're a failure. Why are you doing this? Why do you bother? You can't do any of this. You're no good. And it happens, right? Every time something doesn't go as we expect, this is the way we talk to ourselves. And actually, if we're all being very honest with ourselves, it's not necessarily just when things don't go to plan, right? We can be pretty mean to ourselves, even when things are going to plan. So another really good example is another event that I'm doing that only has a few tickets left. And I'm like, you don't deserve this. We call this imposter syndrome, right? Like, who do you think you are? You're going to show up and you're going to fail and everyone's going to laugh at you and it's going to be a terrible event, blah, 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 blah. Right? So even when things are going to plan, we can be our own worst enemies in the way that we talk to ourselves. So step one of this whole process is saying, how do I talk to myself right now? really thinking about it. And if you've got a pen and paper, maybe you want to jot some ideas down. If you want to share in the comments, then absolutely do. But how do I actually talk to myself right now? And the second question is that how I would talk to my best friend? Because I'm willing to bet 99.9% of you, there will always be the tiny 0.1% that probably will talk to their best friend like that. But the majority of you are going to say, absolutely not. I would never, ever say that to my best friend. Like, not in a million years. I would never talk like that to my best friend. And so then we think, well, why do we talk to ourselves like that? So step one, bringing awareness to it. And we're all pretty aware of this, right? That's why we're here. That's why we're here today, because we know that we probably don't treat ourselves very kindly. And in particular, when things aren't going well, in particular, when we're already stressed, we're already tired, we're already stretched thin, and we just don't talk to ourselves very nicely. So what do we do about this? We're bringing awareness to it is always the first stage. Step two is unlearn. I'm going to move myself because I'm covering what I'm saying now. Step two, unlearn. So when we talk about unlearning, we're talking about kind of going back in time a little bit, doing a little bit of unpicking and unpacking, as I always say, and saying, well, where does that negative inner monologue come from? Where does that voice come from? Can you even hear someone else saying those words to you? Now, this isn't childhood therapy, right? We're not gonna go all the way back in time and be like, oh my goodness, yeah, that's some childhood trauma or whatever. But when we think about the way that we talk to ourselves and the things that we say to ourselves and the way that we're not very kind to ourselves, most of us can think about times in our lives where perhaps someone else has said something similar to us, or they've alluded to something, right? Like, you're not good enough. And let's be honest, a lot of this can come from school. Even if we think we've done really well, the teacher got the red pen out and said, not quite good enough. There's all of this stuff that comes to us from childhood that says, not quite. You're not quite enough. You're not quite good enough. And this builds and builds into adulthood. And we start telling ourselves these stories, and they are stories, right? Because you are absolutely good enough. You are absolutely good enough for whatever it is that you want to do. Even when it doesn't 100% go to plan, you are good enough. But we've got all of these stories, all of these voices from people in our lives, from childhood, even into adulthood, old toxic bosses. We've all had one of those that have made us feel as though we are not good enough. So step two is always unlearn. And this is where, again, we grab that pen and paper and we say, well, where does that voice come from? Now, a really, really good exercise to do here is to kind of challenge the assumption that you've made or the story that you've told yourself. So when you say, I'm a failure, part of unlearning could be to write out the proof that you're a failure and the proof that you are not. Because there is a good chance that actually, whatever it is you think you're failing at, you have done multiple times in better ways, and today was just a bad day. So let's move on to rebuild, and we'll look at how we can reframe this. So one of the biggest mistakes that I see time and time again when it comes to trying to change the way we talk to ourselves is that we go from negative to positive, and it feels really, really unnatural, right? Saying, I'm a failure, I don't like myself, I'm not good enough, to, I love myself, I'm so amazing, right? That feels so unnatural, doesn't it? Like, it just doesn't feel comfortable for the majority of us because, as we've just seen, we've spent probably decades of our lives saying, I'm a failure, I'm not good enough. We've learned that from school, we've learned this. And then we go, I love myself, that's it. I'm just full of self-love and I'm cured. And let's be honest, like, let me know in the comments if you feel like that is a natural way to speak to yourself, because it doesn't for me. If we've spent decades being negative to ourselves, then trying to be super, super positive about ourselves and saying, oh, that's it, I'm full of self-love, is really hard. It doesn't feel natural. So when we talk about rebuilding, we want to think about how we can reframe in a way that feels natural. So reframe in a way that moves from negative, I'm no good, I'm a failure, to neutral. And once you get to neutral, once you start talking neutrally about yourself, then you can move on to a way that feels super positive. But we can't just kind of jump from negative to positive, right? And also, I like to think, right, does your best friend say to you, you are the best human in the world, you are amazing, I love you, you could do no wrong? Or are they honest with you? Can they be quite neutral with you sometimes and be like, oh, do you know what, Lorna, like, that probably wasn't the best thing you've ever done, but it's okay, let's like have a glass of wine and have a laugh about it and we'll forget about it by Monday morning, right? That feels more natural as opposed to going from completely negative to full-blown positive. It does feel fake. Yes, exactly that, Dana. So I've got a few natural reframes for you here for you to, like I said, I'll put these slides in the group, and I've got some journal prompts that are going to go along with this as well. So if you're watching this and you're like, I don't know how to challenge myself on this, I don't know how to unlearn, I don't know how to unpick that and unpack that, I thought about sitting here and doing a load of journal prompts with you and was like, do you know what? It's probably best if we go through this part of the process and then I will add the journal prompts and you guys can sit down with a pen and paper without listening to me rabbit on and do a little bit of work on this, okay? So, natural reframes. I'm a failure. Hands up who says this one a lot. A natural reframe, more neutral, is that didn't exactly go to plan this time round. Let me try again. Instead of, I'm the best in the world. I'm not a failure. I'm the complete opposite of a failure. I'm the biggest accomplishment in the world. Like it doesn't feel natural, does it? I'm so lazy. Hands up who says this one, my burnout crew. I'm feeling low on energy today and that's normal. We don't have to be like, do you know what? Actually, I'm full of beans and I'm, you know, like that's not a natural progression. I'm not good enough. Yeah, this one as well, guilty. I'm always learning and growing. That's part of being human. And Lorna says, I've worked on this for a good few years. It's becoming more natural to be kinder to myself. It takes practice. Yeah, it does. It does take practice. And this is the thing that we have to realize. If we have spent decades of our lives being mean to ourselves, we're not going to be able to click our fingers and just be super, super kind to ourselves, right? We kind of have to go in these stages. And the first stage is to go from negative to more neutral, this more natural reframe. Once we then feel like we hit a neutral point, we can either say, do you know what? That's good. I like sitting at neutral. I like these more natural reframes. I'm happy here. Or we can go from neutral, you know, when we say that didn't exactly go to plan, to a more positive. That was a real learning experience. And I'm really excited. I'm really joyful. I'm really grateful that I had that learning experience. You know, that's how you would move to more of a positive language. But for now, let's just try and get to neutral. So that is your rebuild. But how do we actually put this into action? Because a lot of us have seen this kind of reframing before, right? We kind of know that in order to stop the negative self-talk, we have to perhaps talk better to ourselves, and we know about reframes. So how do we kind of trick our brains into doing that? And that's where Now Take Action comes from. What I want to teach you today is something called a pattern interrupt. Hands up if you know what a pattern interrupt is. This is something that I actually learned back in sales school when I was selling phones. I think I was about 17 and I got sent to Solihull to do some sales training, and they taught us pattern interrupts here. And this is where in sales, you're not supposed to use certain language, right? Can you imagine me as a salesperson, by the way? It just did not work for me. And so they used to use pattern interrupt. So if you said contract, for example, like a phone contract, you weren't allowed to say that word, and you'd have a pattern interrupt. and you would say agreement, right? And now I find trying to say the words phone, contract really hard. I always say agreement, right? So it works. A pattern interrupt is a way of interrupting the habit that your brain already kind of knows. And actually, the way that they used to do it at this sales school was an elastic band on your wrist, and you would ping it every time you said a word that you weren't supposed to say. And that would remind your brain, this is a pattern interrupt. Wait, what am I supposed to be saying instead? Now, I am not going to be advocating for elastic bands on wrists. I'm very surprised that they used to allow that. They actually used to come and ping your elastic band for you. Those were the very strange days. But I do have some pattern interrupt ideas for you here. So, and you may have noticed I did it as well just now. Snap your fingers. The minute you notice yourself saying, I'm a failure, I'm no good, snap. And that's it. I'm glad you don't want us to have elastic bands. Yeah, no, I promise it's nice. It's not nice. Snap your fingers. What was I supposed to say to myself again? That didn't go to plan. Snap. Or clap your hands. It depends where you are. So obviously it can be a lot harder to do some of these if you're in public. That's why I like the next one. Take a physical step backwards, and you can say in your head as well, stop. I used this. This was actually a CBT method that was taught to me many, many years ago called the stop method. And part of it is you take a step back. You take a physical step back. So you notice you're talking negatively to yourself. You take a step backwards. And again, it's a pattern interrupt. It's saying to your brain, something is about to change. And then you reframe with the neutral. You can name it. You can write it down. This can be a little bit more tricky because there's more steps and there's more friction involved, which is why things like snapping your fingers or taking a step backwards is quicker. It's easier to do. Shake your arms or your legs, particularly if the negative thought you're having is creating a lot of stress or a lot of anxiety in your body. Animals shake. If you've ever seen, a dog shaking when it's scared, it's doing that to release that tension. And so if you can shake your arms or your legs, particularly when you're having a very stressful or an anxiety-inducing negative thought, and you're saying to yourself, right, this is the pattern interrupt, I'm about to reframe. One that I've been doing recently is saying to myself, big deep breath, bestie, taking a big deep breath and then reframing. And you can say whatever you want, but have the big deep breath and then, big deep breath, Dana, or big deep breath, Annette, big deep breath, best friend, whatever it is, take that big deep breath and then reframe. And the last one is to put on a song you love, and you can sing and dance to it if you want, or you can just use that song as the pattern interrupt. So think of one song, perhaps save it as like a favorite on whatever you use to listen to music, like Spotify or whatever. So you can literally go into Spotify, play that song and be like, right, this is it. We're about to reframe. So do pattern interrupts make sense? Do we kind of get the logic behind those? Let me know. I think snapping your fingers, clicking your fingers is probably the best one that you can do. But if you ever feel like you're in a situation where, it doesn't feel comfortable to do that because you're in public or whatever, and you don't want to be like doing like jazzy clicking everywhere, perhaps have another one that you can do. It could be big, deep breath, bestie, but you say that in your head and you take a deep breath, or take a physical step backwards is probably another one of my favorites. So let's have a look how this works all the way through. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to notice that negative self-talk. And this takes a little bit of practice as well, but you notice yourself saying, I'm a failure, I'm no good, or whatever. And we do notice it. We do, we do notice it in the back of our minds. And most of the time we just push it down and we're like, oh, I'm not going to think about that. But I want us to bring attention to it, right? So we're going to notice that negative self-talk. And instead of judging ourselves, oh no, I've done it again. Oh, I'm such a bad person. I'm talking to myself like a failure and now I'm doing it again. Like, we're not going to do that. We're going to pattern interrupt. We're going to go, big deep breath, bestie. I like that. That seems to be a favorite. Big deep breath, bestie. Change to neutral. So in your journal prompts that I'm going to give you, I will give you the list of pattern interrupts, and I will give you prompts to help you find your neutral. So you'll be able to write out the things that most come up when you're talking negatively to yourself, and your option of reframing them in a more neutral way that feels natural. And you're just going to rinse and repeat this. And what will happen is you won't need to pattern interrupt anymore, right? It will just start working like magic, where you're just like, oh, I didn't call myself a failure. I said like, oh, that didn't quite go to plan, and you will notice that. You will notice the change. And then if you think I would like to move from neutral to something that's a bit more positive, you do the exercise again, you get those journal prompts back out, you go, okay, what's the neutral way that I talk to myself now, and how would I like that to be more positive? But we find it really, really hard to go from negative to positive without the neutral in the middle. So that is it. I'm going to get your journal prompts up on the app now. If you're not on the app already, because I think this has gone out to all of YouTube today, I will put a link in the bio as well. Any questions or anything like that, let me know now. If not, I'm just going to let you run with this, because I feel like this is one of those things that you kind of have to do. You kind of just have to put pen to paper, see how you're talking to yourself, and start reframing it so that you can start using it, basically. I'm going to let's put the reframes back up while I wait for any questions, because I think this is probably where people struggle the most. And if you start doing this and you think, oh, I really don't know how to reframe this, please just let me know, and I'm happy to work through them, because this is work that I've been doing on myself for a very long time. So I've kind of got into a good habit of naturally moving into neutral reframes, but it is hard in the beginning when we talk so negatively to ourselves. So they're your natural reframes again. And any questions, anything like that, please do reach out to me. Hopefully this has been helpful, and you kind of got an idea, like a process now, the next time you feel like you're being quite negative to yourself. And remember, like I said, besties aren't necessarily the one that's just like, you're doing everything right, you're absolutely great, you're perfect. They have a neutral perspective, right? And they will be honest with you, and that's what feels more natural. What if we can't identify the negative self-talk? I think that's interesting. I think that maybe the best thing to do is to think back to times that haven't gone to plan with these journal prompts in the beginning. Think back to times that haven't gone to plan and think, what did I say to myself in that situation? Did I say, wow, you're so good? Or was I like beating myself up about it? It might be that you don't necessarily notice it sort of subconsciously in the beginning. But if you kind of work backwards and look at instances where things haven't gone to plan, and perhaps you might have spoken negatively to yourself, once you then start to recognize the things that you say to yourself, you'll then start to hear them, if that makes sense. But if you are just going along your day and you don't notice any negative self-talk, then that's a positive thing, right? That means you're not talking negatively to yourself. But this is really for those moments where you're, like I said, where things aren't going great and you're like, yeah, I'm not being very kind to myself here. And how can I change that to something more neutral? So have a think about past scenarios where you may have spoken unkindly to yourself, so that you notice those patterns, you notice those things that you say to yourself that you put yourself down on, and then see if you can notice those in the next situation that feels similar. Perfect. Okay, right. I am going to love and leave you. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I hope it's been helpful. I will pop everything up on the app now. In the next half hour, it'll all be there, including your journal prompts. And any questions, please just let me know. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.